And I said, hey, just out of curiosity, how much are your companies doing a year in revenue right now? He said, well, I think we're doing over $1 billion a year now. And that's when I was like, man, I have a lot to learn from this guy. And one of the things that he said completely shifted my perspective about how to view those things. The first thing that I think, before I even get into it, that I'm going to get asked from this video is like, well, how do you get access to guys like that? And further along this video, I'll explain how he went from $100 million to $1 billion a year in revenue, his process around that. I'll also talk about how he organized his personnel and did his incentive programs, where he was allocating his capital that he felt like he had got the best returns from. So jam-packed, lots of good stuff for you from a man who has done it and lived it. And so the first one is about how do you get access to something like this? Just go buy a millionaire lunch, or just say you'll go work with a millionaire for free. I don't think that's realistic because you have nothing to offer that person. And so I think the first step is self-awareness of understanding that like you only have X amount of value. Now your intention should be to increase that value you have and the achievements that you have so that you can gain access to higher level people. I've gotten to the point in my career where, you know, he knows that we're doing just under 100 million a year. And so I had real questions that I wanted to ask him. You know, he loves all your content and all your books and things like that. You know, achievements will give you access to. And that's kind of the reason that I think a lot of these coaching programs and masterminds and things like that exist is because people can't gain access to that level of person without some sort of prior achievement. And if you haven't achieved it, then you have to compensate that person with money in some way, right? The first thing that I asked him was, I said, hey man, I had been stuck at mid $30 million a year for 3 years, and right now we're pacing probably about 85. But I think that breakthrough was key, which was understanding to focus on people. I think that what I did not understand was that as the entrepreneur, we believe that we are source of everything. And at a certain point, there's only so much influence that you can have. The first thing that he said that I thought was really powerful was understanding what levels of talent exist. And so he said there's really just stars and superstars. Every business that is going to grow and be self-sustaining must have 3 superstars. You need to have somebody who's in charge of acquisition, you need to have someone who's in charge of delivery, and someone who's in charge of operations and shared services, right? That means one person gets new clients, one person delivers on promises, and the third person keeps the first 2 out of jail by making sure that bills are paid and payroll happens and legal and IT and all the lovely things that come with running a business that no one ever thinks about. He was like, if you have 3 superstars, then that business can grow on its own. The second thing was layering on the incentive packages appropriately. And this is something that, Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, and this guy, I feel like I see this common theme around the guys who make the most money in the world is that they are not afraid to give up a little bit of the pie to make more people wealthy so that the pie itself can grow. It's easy to say, it's hard to do. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I made for the vast majority of my early business career was not understanding how to align incentives. And I think Charlie Munger says, like, show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcomes. For me at the time, because I ended up partnering with people who had the same skill sets as me because they seemed cool and we liked the same things. But the reality is that I should have been partnering with people who had different skill sets. And in the companies that I have grown to, 8 figures, multiple figures, and now knocking on 9, right? And have very small percentage of equity that I allocate to people who are star performers. One of the things that he talked about that I referenced earlier, which is understanding the difference between superstars and stars. He said something that really stuck with me, how he identifies superstars. He said, listen, but what I have noticed is that I've never not thought someone was a superstar and then later realized they were. He said, now I've had people who came in and I thought they were superstars and then it turned out they weren't superstars, but I've never had the reverse happen. So I took that as a key learning for myself, which is once we're bringing in high level talent, we're bringing in leaders, we're bringing in drivers, that if we don't immediately think that they're a superstar, then it means that they're probably not a fit for that role. I can tell you as somebody who's hired so many good enough people, and I think later now hired true superstars, the difference is that they're able to solve problems, bring solutions to the table, and implement them without your input. Oftentimes, what you have to end up doing, which is why the gap between 30 to 100 million is about giving up the next level of control, which is, right, you have to give people the autonomy and the power, because a superstar wants that kind of power, right? They want that kind of authority, they want that responsibility, and they want the responsibility because they want the credit for the outcome, right? And so this was something that took me a long time to understand. And the way that he incentivized those people that he shared with me, and is he said he would set up profit shares for those CEOs, and he only did it for the CEOs of his companies. He had so many beliefs. I'll share one of them with you right now. He said, I don't believe that businesses should make a profit. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. He said, I believe that profits are unnatural. He said, I don't think that they're naturally occurring. I think that a business, if left on its, left to its own devices, will pretty much break even. And I thought about that, and I thought more about it. And I was like, I guess that's true. And he's like, it's unnatural to create profits. And it takes willpower to create profits, because you have to create outsized returns compared to the marketplace, because everyone else most of the time has the same resources as you do, or they have the same 24 hours. They have many times the same access to skill and talent that you do. And so if you have the same access, skill, and talent, and you have the same resources or similar resources, then how is it that you're going to outcompete them? It takes something unnatural. It takes something above and beyond. And so for him, he believed that creating profits is a natural and is the sole responsibility of the CEO, which I thought was interesting. He said that he shared 5% of profits with those entrepreneurs, and he also gave them the opportunity to truly buy in, not just like giving equity, but buy in bigger and bigger chunks of the company. He said, I think one of his biggest companies that he has, the CEO owns like 30-something% of that company now and started at 5 or 10. And so the reason I'm sharing this is that, like, at a certain point, the company becomes a conglomeration of companies, of drivers who are driving growth across channels, right? Across individual profit centers that all roll into one larger conglomerate. And so just fundamentally shifting my understanding of like what business will become, instead of like, oh, I'm going to sell 100 doors, now I'm going to sell 1,000 doors, now I'm going to sell 10,000 doors, right? And I say door, it could be pens or ball caps, or it doesn't really matter. But the point is that we're selling a widget of some sort, right? Instead, it's you might have a business that sells 100 doorknobs and 100 doors and 100 door frames and door insurance and all that type of stuff around, and each one of those things becomes a profit center for the overarching conglomerate, and has a driver who has specialization within that industry and has done it before. And so I think when he shared this to me, like, it reinforced one of my core beliefs, which is advanced people are advanced because they never don't do the basics. But one of the conclusions that I have is that the size of the corporation is directly proportional to the amount of superstars that are present. And so when you think, I'm like, superstars, I'm not talking stars. As promised, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this puppy up with his advice on investing. So I'm just giving you straight from the horse's mouth. This is what he told me. So he said, we've done really well in real estate. We have a couple $100 million in real estate. When I buy, he said, I'm more concerned on return of capital than return on capital. So I'll say that again. He said, I'm more concerned when I invest with return of capital than return on capital. The high risk stuff, everybody who's poor wants to buy the lottery ticket, but everyone who's rich just wants to own the lottery game and make 10% a year on it, right? He would rather have slightly higher value buildings that he thought there was less risk in, that he felt more guaranteed that his capital would come back to him, than trying to maximize his internal rate of return. I thought that was also valuable, because I think as you grow as an entrepreneur, doubling your net worth doesn't really change anything about your life, but cutting your net worth in half does. And I'll tell you the one last thing that he told me. This is really good. You're going to want to listen to this one. And this is stuff that you will never find anywhere. All right, you will not find this anywhere written down, because there are so few billionaires. And his answer will crack you up, or at least it cracked me up. And so he said, well, I'll be honest with you, man. He said, when we did 100 million a year for 4 or 5 years. And he said, and honestly, we got so burnt out because we kept wanting to grow. We just couldn't grow it anymore. He said, we couldn't get past 100 million. He said, so we pretty much just gave up. And we took the company, we broke it into 100 little pieces, and we gave, profit sharing and small equity pieces, phantom equity, to our best superstars and our drivers. And he said, me and my partner pretty much kind of checked out. He said, and here's what's crazy. 5 years later, we were at 500 million. And 5 years after that, he said, we were at $1 billion. I think the way you get to $1 billion is not trying to get to $1 billion. And I think that seeing how he did that, going from 100 million to $1 billion a year, and that he was like, it's luck, And it was basically incentivizing a lot of people, and it was growing the pie. It was making other people wealthy and allowing you to participate in their creation of their own wealth.